Well, it is the big question, isn't it? I am asked this question again and again and again in my real life. Why would I dedicate so much time, so much passion, so much money, really, to science fiction? Well, science fiction is not really trendy as books go and has never really been, apart from when a lucky book becomes a blockbuster. But science fiction is much more than just cinema fodder. Science fiction has had a bad reputation for literally ever. It is associated with low literature, or worse, with comic books. Yes, I said the big C words. But it is a very old genre since the like of Cavendish and Shelley. Hi everyone, this is Crowley's Bookshop. Today I want to explore with you the reason why I think we as a society should read more science fiction. And you probably should read more science fiction as well. The very first thing to remember with science fiction is that it is, like autism, a spectrum. There is the pew-pew science fiction in space, like Neil Asher or Star Wars, for example, and there is the very philosophical pieces like Last and First Men by Olaf Stapledon. And in between, well, there is a lot. So when you talk about science fiction with someone, you may not speak about the same thing in the first place. Is a person talking about 1984? Or is she talking about Alien? Is she talking about Planet of the Apes, which movie, by the way? Or is she talking about the new, I don't know, Stephen King book? Some of them are science fiction. So I think we should make a collective effort to define what science fiction is when we are talking about this as a society, because I guarantee that most of us are not talking about the same thing. Science fiction is the literature of the future and of humanity. It asks questions about what it means to be human and what it means to be human in an ever-changing world. It is the literature of the question, what if? It helps to both prevent and invent the future. And it helps to highlight the relevant questions about the future of humanity. And it is the reason why there is such a big spectrum of science fiction in both books and movies and shows, because the future is a very wide spectrum and variety of questions and what if. From social, technological and scientific advancements, there is a lot to talk about. Science fiction is the fiction of ideas. Science fiction challenges the reader to explore the important social, moral, technological, scientific issues that we are facing today and to this very day. When you think about it, science fiction rarely is really about the future. It is about the now, but wrapped into a compelling narrative that is set mostly into the future, or in the future of the person who wrote the book, because, you know, science fiction is an old genre. Ice-T said that imagination is more important than knowledge, and well, science fiction is doing exactly that. It is giving us the tools and the questions in order to apply imagination to our future knowledge. It is the reason I think that a lot of science fiction writers are scientists in the first place. I think it is an important thing to remember. Science fiction is also a philosophical thought experiment. Of course, not every single science fiction work is philosophical, but every single science fiction work is about politics and is about humanity as a whole. Maybe not about humans, but it transcribes the human experience to different people, whether they are aliens or whatever else. And so it helps to see what it means to be humans in a context of technological society and technological advancements, and what it means for us as an ever-changing society. I'm going to say the big E word that a lot of people use to insult science fiction and fiction in general. Science fiction is also the literature of escapism. And I know, as I said, that escapism is a bit hurled left and right as an insult to say that people don't want to live in reality and they want to live in a world that doesn't exist. But it's not necessarily the case. I mean, escapism can be a good thing as well. It confronts us to the vast unknown, to the big questions of the what if and the big question of, is there something else, really, to life or to space or to whatever, religion, science, whatever you want to talk about. Science fiction is exploring it all. The art of space, the world of science fiction, they are so far away from what we see and what we know, yet when they are well done, they are completely believable. Some of the feats that we see in science fiction books are so far away from what we are able to achieve at the moment and from our current standards, and it is something we can strive for as, you know, a society. I think it is also interesting to notice that a lot of scientists that we know of today and that are very well known in their different fields of studies have said that they have been inspired by science fiction in some ways or another. I think it is a brilliant way to see how science fiction can inspire us as individuals. Science fiction is used to hold a mirror up to our society, to see how what we are facing right now is going to influence our future. It is, I think, a very important thing to stay critical with our current politics and our current views of, society, art, whatever, and to be able to recognize that in works and books. And this is the reason why I think science fiction is so important right now, as in 2025, and it has always been, of course, but I think it is critical that we stay informed with this type of literature right now. I mean, I don't think it is for nothing that some states in the United States right now are banning some of the biggest dystopian books of the 40s and the 50s. I mean, 1984, just to, say the biggest one that is being banned at the moment in some schools and some districts. I think it is very crucial that we recognize that and we recognize how powerful these stories can be. But also, and I will come back to this in another video, science fiction is not necessarily all dark and negative and gloomy, and the future can hold very nice things. Although science fiction can be a bit doomeristic at heart, it can give you some very nice life lessons and life goals as well. I'm talking mostly about the work of Becky Chambers, for example, but even books like Parable of the Sower, for example, for all its doomeristic views, have a very positive message at its core. For me, science fiction is a lot of different things, from the big questions about humanity and what it means to be confronted to something other than us, to the technological advancements, to sciences, but also all the life lessons that I took from the books. Some of the most incredible work of fiction and some of the most beautiful life lessons I've ever been taught came from science fiction. And I am pretty positive that I couldn't have these lessons from any other type of literature or any other genres. Because I've always been very intrigued by space and what there is out there, science fiction has always worked pretty well on me. But I think that you don't even have to, be intrigued by that for science fiction to have some sort of influence on you. As I said, science fiction is very vast, and while the general publics mostly think about space opera when they think about science fiction, 1984 is science fiction. The Parable of the Sower is science fiction. It is a very wild genre, and I think by, going back to all the subgenres of science fiction, people can take a lot from this genre in general. I'm always able to get something from a very good science fiction book, whether it is some ideas of science that I've never really considered before, whether it is some political argument, whether it is some great life lesson, whether it is tears, it's also valid. There is always something that I will learn with science fiction. It is really the fiction of curiosity for me. I learned so much about history, about science, about biology, about technology, about space, about so many things that I've learned from science fiction, and I know it is something that I would have never been able to have in other genres, because it is a genre that is so vast. When you talk about historical fiction or literary fiction, it is by default genres that are a bit more, smaller in their views. Science fiction is so broad in what it can talk about and what it can touch as subject. It is absolutely fascinating to go into. And that is the reason why I will never be tired of this genre, because there is so much to learn and to take from it. And what about the future of science fiction? I know it is a big question when I recommend the genre to people. It's like, oh, but now it's just done and there is nothing left to read because all the stories have been created. I don't agree with that. I think it is great, actually. I am reading the old words of the last few years. At the moment, it is the challenge that I set myself for the foreseeable future. And let me tell you, it's been great. I mean, not every single new book is fantastic, but I have been having a great time in general, discovering all the new stories that have been out in the last couple years. And I am already putting on a list of the books that are coming out in 2026. And they're going to be great. The future of science fiction is going to be fantastic because we are living in a very difficult political climate, whether you are in Europe like me or in the US or in Asia or whatever. The political climate is difficult all over the world at the moment. There is a lot of fodder to, for authors and creative to talk about politically. But I think artistically, we live in a world that is so beyond brilliant. We are confronted day in, day out with cultures that we have never been able to talk about before and we have never been confronted with before. I think it gives way to such a pool of creation and ideas and imagination, and I can't wait to see what people are going to create next. As I said, I know science fiction has a bad reputation. It is deemed as a very low genre of literature because it is set in the future, or it is set in, you know, a fantasy land that doesn't exist. It is not set in reality. But I think there is nothing more real than science fiction, because it uses our society or the societies before us for the oldest books and holds a mirror to it and says, hey, this is what is happening right now, or this is what was happening at the moment, and this is how this technology or this social advancement is going to change the world for us, in good or in bad or in both. And as I said, science fiction is such a wide genre. There is always going to be something for you to like. Maybe you don't like things that set in space for some reasons because you don't like the idea of space stations. Well, there are plenty of stories that are set on Earth within our era, basically. And you absolutely do not have to read about things that are happening in space. It's too bad because you are missing on a lot of different things and a lot of great stories, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to read about aliens, you don't have to read about biology, you don't have to read about a lot of different things that maybe don't jive with you for some reasons or another to actually love science fiction. There are a lot of different subgenres that you can get your hands into. Cyberpunk, for example, from cyberpunk to, as I said, space opera, to zombie stories, to more literary fictions as well, to more philosophical stories. There are a lot to take from in science fiction. And well, I will be taking you along with me to discover the genre, and I hope that you will enjoy it. Because trust me, there is no other genre like science fiction. Well guys, I hope that you like this video. It is a bit more of a talk through video. I didn't prepare it as well and as much as other videos because I really wanted to have my thoughts and just being like showing the passion that I have for science fiction. I hope that you like it. Please tell me in the comments below what drove you to science fiction in the first place. To me, it was Star Wars. It was the very first science fiction stuff that I've seen. I was 4 years old. I mean, I probably saw some sort of cartoon that was science fiction-ish before, but to me what really stands out was Star Wars. But I was so fascinated by the story and by the ships and by the design, about the things sailing into space. And of course, it took me a lot of time to be aware of the political issues, but I remember being so entranced and so enthused by the story and by what was happening and by the creativity and the imagination that it just stayed with me ever since. Then it was Star Trek, of course, that did a lot for me, and all the other stories of the early 2000s. We were fed in the early 2000s when it came to science fiction, mostly in movies and shows, but books as well. And then it stayed with me forever. The very first adult science fiction book that I ever read was Dune, and shortly after 1994. So I went right into the classics from the get-go, but I remember, of course, reading other books when I was a child, mostly The Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin and The Discworld by Terry Pratchett. Those were the two big, I mean, this is fantasy, but you know, it uses elements of science fiction as well. So I was put into the big bath very early on as a child, and it never left me. So please, guys, tell me what pushed you to science fiction and into science fiction, and what kept you there at the end of the day. And if you are working your way into science fiction, stay here, because next week there will be a video about my top 10 favorite books of all time when it comes to science fiction, and I'm so excited to share this list. It was very difficult to put a list of my 10 favorite stories because there are so much that I adore, but you know, I hope that it will help you maybe if you want to go into science fiction. And I also made a video about how to go into science fiction and the books that I think are great if you are a newbie, both as a reader and as a science fiction enthusiast. So these two videos are coming up, and I hope that you will like it. That's it for me. Please follow me on social media if you want more science fiction or more of me. I'm available on Twitter, on Instagram, on GoodReads, and on TikTok. And I will see you guys later. Can I get a wahoo? Cheers.